Hey guys, tonight we wander into a place most people only ever see as a pale blue blotch on a map, if they notice it at all. If you're enjoying these slow walks through the past, gently tap like and subscribe, but only if it actually adds something to your evenings. And while you're getting settled, let me know in the comments which country you're watching from, and what the local time is there right now. There's something comforting about imagining all of us listening together, scattered across the planet, half awake, half dreaming. You're standing at the edge of Lake Chad, but not the Lake Chad you'd recognize today. This one is vast, swollen, confident. The water stretches far beyond the horizon, shimmering under a hazy sun, reeds whispering as a warm breeze slides across the surface. You squint because the light is intense, and also because you're trying to understand how a place now famous for shrinking was once one of Africa's great inland seas. And yes, small reality check, you probably wouldn't survive here very long without local knowledge, sunscreen made of questionable ingredients, and a deep respect for crocodiles. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk along the muddy shoreline, feet sinking slightly with each step, and you begin to notice signs of life that don't belong to birds or fish. There are footprints, human ones, pressed into damp earth that smells rich, almost sweet. Nearby, low mounds rise gently from the ground. These are not natural hills. They're the earliest whispers of the Sao Civilization, a culture that flourished here more than 1,000 years ago, long before modern borders, long before most written records, quietly deciding that this shifting, watery world was worth calling home. The Sao people didn't stumble into Lake Chad by accident. Mainstream historians agree that by around the first millennium CE, complex communities were already forming along the lake's southern and eastern edges. You imagine families arriving in small groups, drawn by water, fish, fertile soil, and the simple promise that life could be sustained here if you were clever enough. And clever they were. They settled on slightly raised ground, natural ridges and artificial mounds, just high enough to avoid seasonal floods, but close enough to benefit from them. It's an elegant compromise, like parking your house right next to a river, but not directly in it. You crouch down and scoop a handful of soil. It's dark and heavy, packed with nutrients carried in by floodwaters. This is the quiet secret of Lake Chad. It gives and takes constantly. The shoreline moves year to year, sometimes dramatically, forcing anyone who lives here to pay attention. Historians still argue whether the earliest Sao were migrants from the Nile region, descendants of older Saharan populations pushed south by desertification, or a blending of multiple groups who simply learned to get along because the lake demanded it. You straighten up as the sound of voices drifts toward you, low, rhythmic, unhurried. Ahead, you see the outline of a settlement taking shape. Circular huts made from mud and reeds cluster together like a loose necklace. Smoke curls lazily from cooking fires, carrying the smell of fish and something nutty, maybe ground seeds. Children dart between structures, their laughter sharp and sudden, then gone again. This is not a temporary camp. This is a decision. The Sao are staying. One well-established historical fact is that the Sao were among the earliest known settled societies in the Lake Chad Basin, predating later kingdoms like Kanem-Bornu. Archaeological sites show continuous habitation, suggesting generations were born, lived, and died here, all within earshot of water lapping against the shore. You imagine elders sitting in the shade, pointing out landmarks that no longer exist, the old fishing tree, the far waterline, their memories stretching back through decades of environmental change. And then there are the odd details, the quirky bits that make you pause. Some Sao sites contain enormous clay jars buried in the ground, possibly used for grain storage, fermentation, or ritual purposes. One fringe theory suggests they may even have been used as communal cooling chambers, an ancient response to brutal heat. No one's entirely sure. What is clear is that these people were experimenting, adapting, tinkering with life the same way you might rearrange furniture until the room finally feels right. As you move deeper into the settlement, you notice something else. Order. Huts are spaced deliberately. Paths curve gently, never straight, guiding both people and water. This isn't chaos, it's quiet engineering. The Sao understood that Lake Chad was alive, temperamental, and occasionally rude. They built their lives accordingly, accepting that permanence here didn't mean rigidity, it meant flexibility. You pause at the water's edge again as the sun begins to sink, turning the lake's surface into molten gold. Somewhere beneath that water are older shorelines, older camps, older footprints, all swallowed and revealed again in cycles that repeat over centuries. The Sao knew this rhythm intimately. They didn't fight it. They listened to it. And as night approaches, insects begin their steady hum, like a primitive white noise machine. It's soothing, almost hypnotic. You realize that this place, unstable, unpredictable, demanding, was also deeply comforting. Water nearby. Food abundant. Community close. For the Sao, this was the center of the world, even if the rest of the world had no idea they existed. You take one last look at the settlement, glowing softly in firelight, and you let yourself linger there, because this is only the beginning, and the lake has many more stories to tell. You don't leave the settlement when you wake, because here, waking just means opening your eyes to the same soft chaos of water, mud, and movement. The ground beneath you feels cool, still holding on to night. Around you, the Sao village stretches outward in careful circles, every structure curved, every edge rounded, as if straight lines were quietly discouraged. You begin to notice that nothing here feels accidental. The houses are made of mud, but not the sloppy kind you might imagine splashed together in a hurry. This mud is kneaded, mixed with plant fibers, shaped by hands that know exactly how thick a wall needs to be to keep out heat during the day and trap warmth at night. You run your fingers along one wall and feel the faint grooves left by palms and fingers, a frozen echo of the person who built it. Mainstream archaeology confirms this style. Round, mud-brick dwellings were common across Sao sites, chosen for stability, airflow, and resistance to cracking during seasonal floods. You step back and look again. Circular homes, circular storage pits, circular gathering spaces. Even the village itself curves gently around a central open area. It's almost meditative, like living inside a spiral. Historians still argue whether this preference for circular design was purely practical or carried symbolic meaning, perhaps reflecting cycles of water, seasons, or life itself. Either way, it works. Wind flows smoothly around the structures instead of slamming into corners, and rainwater glides past rather than pooling in destructive ways. As you walk, your feet follow slightly raised paths. These aren't roads in the modern sense. They're subtle ridges, compacted by years of footsteps. During floods, these paths remain just high enough to stay passable, connecting homes like lifelines. You imagine water creeping in slowly, predictable but unstoppable, and the entire village calmly adjusting, lifting goods, shifting routines, waiting it out. No panic, just experience. At the village's edge, you find low embankments shaped like crescent moons. They guide floodwater away from homes and into fields beyond. This is quiet hydrology, learned not from textbooks but from mistakes repeated until they finally stop happening. There's a gentle confidence in these constructions, as if the Sao understood that Lake Chad would always win eventually, so you might as well negotiate politely. A woman passes you, carrying a woven basket balanced effortlessly on her head. She nods, completely unbothered by your presence, because in this narrative, you're just another pair of hands who belongs here. The basket smells faintly of damp reeds and dried fish. You glance inside and see the silvery flicker of scales. Fishing is woven into the settlement's design as much as the mud walls themselves. Some homes sit closer to the water, others slightly inland, forming a gradient of livelihoods from lake-focused to field-focused. One quirky detail stands out. Many homes are built atop older homes. Archaeologists have uncovered layers of occupation stacked vertically, like a lasagna of human persistence. When flood damage became too severe, instead of abandoning the site, the Sao often leveled what remained and built again on top. It's recycling, but make it existential. Over centuries, this created artificial mounds tells that rose above the floodplain. You're standing on history without even realizing it. You wander into one of the storage areas. Large clay-lined pits sink into the ground, their openings covered with woven mats and sealed with mud. These pits protect grain from moisture and pests, and they also stabilize temperature. There's a fringe idea, more whispered than shouted, that some of these pits doubled as hiding places during raids or even temporary shelters during extreme heat. Evidence is thin, and historians still argue whether that's clever insight or creative overreach, but standing here in the cool shade, it doesn't feel impossible. As the sun climbs higher, you notice how little direct light enters the homes. Doorways are low, forcing you to bow slightly as you enter, a subtle posture of humility enforced by architecture. Inside, it's dim, cool, and calm. The air smells of earth and smoke, grounding in a way modern air conditioning never quite manages. You sit for a moment and realize something quietly impressive. These houses breathe. The walls absorb moisture when floods arrive and release it slowly afterward. The roofs, layers of reeds and thatch, shed rain efficiently while insulating against heat. This isn't primitive, it's tuned. Modern architects would later rediscover these principles and pretend they invented them. Outside again, you hear laughter and the dull thud of feet packing fresh mud onto a wall. Maintenance is constant here. Structures aren't built once and forgotten, they're alive like the lake itself. Cracks are filled, walls are smoothed, roofs are relaid. There's no illusion of permanence, just continuity. You pause near the village's centre, where an open circular space invites gathering. This area doubles as meeting ground, workspace, and social anchor. It's where decisions are made, stories shared, disputes softened by familiarity. Defensive logic plays a role too. With homes clustered inward, the village presents a unified front. If danger approaches, from rival groups, wild animals, or just unexpected human drama, everyone is close enough to respond together. A light joke floats through your mind. This is basically an ancient hoe, except the fees are mud and cooperation, and somehow it works better than most modern versions. As afternoon drifts toward evening, shadows stretch, and the village seems to exhale. You understand now that these circular towns aren't just responses to water, they're expressions of worldview. Flexible, adaptive, communal, built to bend without breaking. You look back toward the lake, its surface flashing between blue and brown depending on the light, and you sense that every wall, every path, every curve here is part of an ongoing conversation with water, one that will continue long after this particular settlement is buried, rebuilt, or forgotten. For now, though, it holds. And you're still here, walking slowly, listening. You wake again to movement, not sound. The Sao settlement doesn't explode into morning, it stretches into it. The lake exhales mist, thin and pale, drifting between huts like a shy visitor. You sit up slowly, because nobody here rushes unless something is on fire or actively trying to bite them. Daily life begins with patience. You follow the narrow raised path toward the water as the first fishing canoes glide in. They're long, shallow, and quiet, carved to skim rather than cut. Mainstream historical evidence shows that fishing was a cornerstone of sow survival. Catfish, tilapia, and other lake species formed a reliable protein source. You watch as nets are hauled in, their cords darkened by use, hands working by feel more than sight. There's a rhythm to it that feels older than instructions, learned by watching, corrected gently, repeated forever. Near the shore, fish are sorted with calm efficiency. Some are laid out to dry on raised racks, safe from scavengers. Others are destined for immediate cooking. Smoke rises again, this time sharper, mingling with the damp air. You catch the scent of fermenting fish paste, a sow staple that probably tastes better than it smells, though that's a low bar. Someone jokes about it, and you realize humor survives just fine without writing. You drift inland where fields stretch across recently exposed ground. Lake Chad recedes seasonally, leaving behind rich soil like a gift with conditions attached. Crops are planted quickly, sorghum, millet, timed to grow before the water inevitably returns. This practice, known today as flood recession agriculture, is a confirmed historical fact in the region. You imagine farmers watching the waterline like hawks, because planting too early or too late could mean hunger. No pressure. Children trail behind adults, carrying small tools, learning without formal lessons. A boy tries to imitate an elder's planting motion and misses entirely. Nobody scolds him. He'll get it. The lake teaches through repetition, not lectures. Back in the settlement, cooking dominates the late morning. Pots sit nestled into ash rings, bubbling quietly. Clay vessels, thick, dark, and beautifully uneven, hold stews of grain and fish. Archaeologists have found many such pots, often decorated with incised patterns. One quirky detail: some pots bear markings that don't repeat consistently, leading to speculation they might represent family symbols or personal signatures. Historians still argue whether this was early identity expression or just someone getting bored with straight lines. You help grind grain using a stone quern. It's heavy, meditative work. Arms ache slowly, pleasantly. Conversation drifts in and out, punctuated by laughter and long silences that feel earned. This is not a loud society. It's attentive. Everyone seems tuned to small changes. The wind shifting, birds scattering, clouds thickening over the lake. Midday heat settles like a blanket. Activity slows. People retreat into shaded interiors or sit beneath awnings of woven reeds. This is when stories surface. Elders speak quietly of past floods, of years when the lake rose higher than expected, of times when fish vanished and returned. Memory functions as survival data here. You listen closely because these stories aren't entertainment. They're instructions disguised as nostalgia. One fringe tidbit slips in. An elder mentions a year when the lake walked away, shrinking so fast people thought it angry. Modern science confirms Lake Chad has expanded and contracted dramatically over centuries, but the emotional framing feels important. To the Sao, the lake isn't a resource, it's a personality. Possibly a moody one. As afternoon fades, repair work resumes. Nets are mended. Cracks in walls are smoothed with fresh mud. Nothing waits until it's broken beyond repair. This constant maintenance is part of daily life, a quiet acknowledgement that decay is normal and manageable. You think about your own ignored to-do list and feel gently judged by the past. Later, trade happens casually. Fish for grain, pots for dried meat. No coinage, just mutual need and familiarity. Some items, beads, polished stones, carry more symbolic than practical value. These small exchanges reinforce relationships, weaving the settlement tighter. As the sun dips low, meals are shared communally. People eat slowly, talking less, listening more. Firelight flickers across faces, turning everyone into a moving shadow. You notice scars, laugh lines, calloused hands. These bodies are shaped by work, not chairs. Night approaches without ceremony. The lake darkens, insects begin their chorus, and the air cools just enough to feel kind. You lie back and stare at the stars, sharper here than anywhere you remember. Someone points out constellations, not with names, but with stories tied to seasons and water levels. Practical astronomy, wrapped in myth. You realize daily life here is not about comfort, but balance, between water and land, work and rest, memory and adaptation. It's ordinary, yes, but it's also finely tuned. And as sleep creeps in, you understand that this rhythm, repeated endlessly, is what truly built the Sao civilization. You don't notice the sound of metal at first. It's subtle, more of a muted tap than a ring, lost among voices, birds, and the constant whisper of the lake. But once you hear it, you can't unhear it. Somewhere in the settlement, iron is being worked. And that changes the feeling of the place entirely. You follow the sound to a shaded area near the edge of the village, where heat is welcome rather than oppressive. A small group is gathered around a low clay furnace. It's unassuming, squat, almost shy. Mainstream archaeological evidence confirms that the Sao were skilled ironworkers, producing tools, weapons, and ornaments long before outside empires reached this region. You watch as bellows, made from animal hide and wood, are pumped rhythmically, feeding oxygen into the fire. The furnace glows like a living thing, breathing in time with human effort. The smith moves carefully, deliberately. Iron here is precious, not flashy. No dramatic sparks flying everywhere. This isn't a movie montage. It's controlled, methodical. A tool is heated, shaped, reheated, shaped again. Every motion is economical, learned through years of repetition. You feel the heat on your face and instinctively step back, earning a quiet chuckle from someone nearby. Ancient craftsmanship, 1. Modern reflexes, 0. Iron tools change daily life in ways that feel almost invisible until you imagine living without them. Stronger hoes cut deeper into flood-soaked soil. Sharper knives make fishing and food preparation faster. Durable spear points improve hunting and defense. The Sao didn't just have iron, they integrated it calmly, sensibly, without fanfare. Historians still argue whether ironworking arrived here through diffusion from other African regions or developed independently, but either way, the skill stuck and spread. Not far from the furnace, clay takes center stage. You kneel beside a potter shaping a vessel by hand, no wheel in sight. The clay is dug locally, mixed with sand and crushed potsherds for strength. Fingers pinch, smooth, coax the form up. Each pot grows slowly, like it's being persuaded rather than forced. Archaeologists have found thousands of Sao pottery fragments, many with distinctive incised or stamped patterns. These designs aren't random, they repeat across sites, hinting at shared aesthetics, maybe even shared identity. One particularly quirky artifact comes to mind as you watch: Sao terracotta figurines. Human faces with exaggerated features. Animals frozen mid-motion. Some are serene, others look mildly judgmental. No one agrees exactly what they were for. Religious icons? Ancestor representations? Toys? One fringe idea suggests they were teaching tools, used to pass down stories visually. Historians still argue whether their purpose was sacred, social, or something in between, and honestly, they might have been all three. You lift a finished pot, surprised by its weight. It's warm from the sun, slightly rough, undeniably solid. This will hold water, grain, stew, life, basically. You set it down carefully, suddenly aware of how much trust is placed in everyday objects. Metal and clay intersect in subtle ways. Pottery molds help shape metal. Metal tools refine pottery. It's a feedback loop of skill, one craft nudging the other forward. You notice jewelry too, iron bracelets, copper beads acquired through trade, worn not to show wealth, but continuity. These items are repaired rather than replaced. Nothing is disposable here. As afternoon drifts on, you wander through storage areas where finished tools rest quietly. Hoes stacked neatly. Knives wrapped in cloth. Spearheads tucked away. There's no sense of hoarding, just preparedness. Defensive needs exist, everyone knows that. But fear doesn't dominate. Tools serve life first, conflict second. Someone hands you a small clay figure, no bigger than your palm. Its surface is smoothed from handling, edges softened by time. You turn it over and notice faint markings along the back. They don't match anything else you've seen. A maker's mark? A personal symbol? A bored artist experimenting? No one explains. They don't need to. Mystery is allowed to exist here without being solved immediately. As the sun lowers, the furnace fire is banked, not extinguished, ready for tomorrow. Clay pots are set aside to dry slowly, protected from sudden cooling that could cause cracks. Patience again. Always patience. You step back and take in the scene. Craft here is not separated from daily life or elevated above it. It's woven in, like breathing. Every object tells a quiet story of adaptation, of humans learning how to work with what the land offers rather than demanding more. You feel a strange comfort in that. The idea that skill, once learned, can ripple outward across generations, shaping not just tools, but the way a society understands itself. And as the last light fades, you realize that long after voices fall silent and huts return to earth, these crafted things, iron, clay, pattern, will linger, waiting to be found, waiting to be misunderstood, waiting patiently, like everything else the Sao left behind. You don't see belief systems here the way you see tools or houses. They don't sit in one place. They drift. They hum quietly beneath everything, like the lake itself, always present even when you're not looking directly at it. As you move through the settlement, you begin to sense that the Sao world is crowded, not just with people, but with presences. Near the edge of the village stands a large tree, its roots twisting up through the soil like knuckles. No one cuts it. No one leans tools against it. People pass by with a slight pause, a softened step. This is a place where ancestors are thought to linger. Mainstream historical interpretation suggests that the Sao practiced ancestor veneration, believing the dead remained close, invested in the well-being of the living. You feel it in the way voices lower here, the way children are gently redirected if they get too loud. At dusk, a small gathering forms. No announcement, no ritual drumbeat to summon attention. People just arrive. Someone places a clay figure at the base of the tree, one of those same terracottas you've seen earlier. Its face is calm, eyes wide, expression unreadable. A fringe interpretation suggests these figurines acted as spiritual intermediaries, stand-ins for ancestors or protective spirits. Historians still argue whether they were worshipped, honored, or simply acknowledged, but the care shown toward them feels deliberate. Animals move freely through the settlement, and none more confidently than the crocodiles near the water's edge. You're told, gently but firmly, not to provoke them. Crocodiles here aren't just dangerous, they're significant. In Sao belief, certain animals carry spiritual authority, acting as guardians or messengers between worlds. Crocodiles, masters of water and land, fit perfectly into that role. There's even a whispered story, more folklore than fact, that some clans believed themselves descended from crocodiles. Make of that what you will, but it does explain the respectful distance everyone keeps. Fire plays its own role. Not dramatic bonfires, just steady hearth flames that are never allowed to die completely. Fire is continuity. Fire is memory. You watch someone carefully carry embers from one hearth to another, ensuring the flame is shared rather than restarted. It's practical, yes, but it also feels symbolic, like passing on something fragile and important. As night deepens, stories emerge. These aren't grand epics shouted into the dark. They're murmured, intimate, told close to the fire. Tales of the lake swelling overnight, of animals speaking in dreams, of ancestors warning families before disasters. You notice that no one asks whether these stories are true. Truth here isn't binary. It's useful. If a story keeps you alive, it matters. One mainstream fact stands quietly beneath all this. Religion among the Sao was deeply intertwined with daily survival and environment. There's no evidence of massive temples or centralized priesthoods. Belief was local, flexible, responsive. Historians still argue whether spiritual authority rested with elders, specific ritual specialists, or shifted depending on circumstance. Watching the gathering, you suspect the answer is all of the above. You catch a light joke drifting through the circle. Someone mentions an ancestor who supposedly haunts only lazy people. Laughter follows, soft but genuine. Even the spirit world, it seems, is expected to pull its weight. Later, you're invited to sit near a small shrine-like space inside a home. It's simple. A niche in the wall holding beads, a polished stone, a tiny figurine. This is personal belief, scaled to family size. You're reminded that spirituality here isn't about spectacle. It's about reassurance. A way to feel less alone in a landscape that can change its mind overnight. Before sleep, a brief gesture is made toward the lake, hands dipped in water, touch to forehead. Gratitude, perhaps. Or caution, or both. The lake giveth. The lake taketh away. Everyone knows this. As you lie down, insects singing, firelight flickering low, you realize belief here isn't something you do at certain times. It's something you carry, like a shadow, present in craft, in food, in the careful way people speak about the past. And as your eyes grow heavy, you sense the ancestors too, not as ghosts, but as accumulated memory, watching quietly, hoping you remember what kept them alive. You begin to notice it in small ways first. A pause before a decision. A glance toward an elder before work shifts direction. Power among the Sao doesn't announce itself loudly, it settles into the cracks of daily life, almost politely, like water finding the lowest point. At the center of the settlement, the open circular space fills slowly as people gather. This isn't a ceremony, exactly. It's problem-solving. Mainstream historical understanding suggests Sao communities were organized under local chiefs or prominent leaders, likely chosen through lineage, experience, or a mix of both. You watch as one older figure speaks, voice calm, gestures minimal. Others respond. No one interrupts. Authority here is less about commanding and more about being listened to. You realize leadership is situational. The best fisher speaks when water levels shift. The best farmer speaks when planting times change. During threats, the best defender steps forward. Historians still argue whether Sao leadership was centralized or fluid, but standing here, it feels adaptive. Like everything else, defensive features become clearer once you know to look for them. The village isn't walled in stone, but subtle earthworks ring the outer edge, low embankments, ditches softened by time. Homes cluster inward, leaving open space beyond, forcing any approach to be visible. This is confirmed by archaeological layouts showing compact settlement cores. You imagine approaching enemies slowing, uncertain, suddenly very aware they're being watched. Weapons exist, but they don't dominate life. Spears lean against walls, knives hang within reach, iron tools double as defense when needed. Conflict is possible, accepted, but not glorified. One quirky detail uncovered at some Sao sites is the presence of deliberately bent or buried weapons, suggesting ritual decommissioning. Historians still argue whether this symbolized peace, mourning, or spiritual appeasement, but it implies intention rather than chaos. You walk the settlement's perimeter at dusk. From here, you see how water itself acts as defense. Marshy ground, shifting channels, unpredictable footing. Outsiders would struggle. Locals glide. The lake is both neighbor and bodyguard. Conversation turns to neighboring groups. Trade partners. Occasional rivals. There's no map, but everyone knows where lines are. Loosely drawn, constantly renegotiated. Disputes happen. Sometimes they escalate. Often they dissolve into negotiation, marriages, or shared rituals. Power here includes the ability to avoid unnecessary fights. A light joke surfaces as someone mentions a past skirmish that ended because both sides ran out of arrows and got tired. Ancient conflict resolution, mutual exhaustion. As night falls, watch shifts are established, not formal guards, just people staying awake in turns, listening. You sit with one, staring into the dark, senses tuned outward. This vigilance feels communal rather than enforced. Protection is everyone's responsibility. Inside the settlement, fires burn low. Children sleep close to adults. Elders rest where they can hear everything. Authority radiates outward from trust, not fear. You think about how rare that feels. Before you sleep, you glance once more at the lake, moonlight breaking into fragments on its surface. Power here, like water, is shared, shifting, never fully owned. And you understand that these quiet systems, leadership, defense, cooperation, are what allow the Sao to endure, even when the world around them refuses to stay still. You feel movement long before you see it, not the restless motion of the lake, but the deliberate rhythm of travel. People are coming and going, not in a hurry, not aimless either. This settlement, quiet as it feels, is not isolated. It's connected by paths you can't see all at once, stretching outward through grassland, river channels, and sandy edges where the savanna begins to thin. Trade here doesn't announce itself with caravans or banners. It arrives in fragments, a bundle of dried fish carried in from the lakeshore, a string of beads worn by someone who clearly wasn't born here. Mainstream historical evidence confirms that the Sao participated in regional trade networks, exchanging local products like fish, salt, and crafted goods for items such as copper, stone, and decorative materials sourced far beyond the Lake Chad basin. You're standing in a place that quietly knows the outside world. Near the center of the village, small exchanges take place, almost absent-mindedly. No market square, no shouting prices. Goods change hands alongside conversation. A pot for a blade, fish for grain. Trust acts as currency. You realize how important reputation is here. If you cheat someone, you don't just lose a trade, you lose a future. You meet travelers who move seasonally, following water routes during the wet months and land paths when things dry out. Canoes slip along channels that don't exist year-round, linking distant communities like temporary veins. When water retreats, footpaths emerge, etched into the earth by generations who remembered where the lake used to be. Historians still argue how extensive these routes were, but archaeological finds suggest the Sao were far from isolated villages. One quirky detail catches your attention: beads made from materials not native to the region, possibly carnelian or glass. Their presence hints at long-distance connections, maybe even indirect contact with North African or Nile trade systems. No one here seems impressed by them. They're valued, yes, but not worshipped. Practicality always wins. You sit beside a traveller repairing a sandal. He speaks of places where the ground never floods and places where water never leaves. You try to imagine both and fail slightly. Stories function as maps here. You don't need to go somewhere if someone else can describe it well enough. Trade also carries ideas, new fishing techniques, different pottery styles, alternate ways of shaping tools. Nothing arrives unchanged, everything is adapted. The Sao don't copy, they translate. As evening approaches, goods are stored carefully. Trade items aren't hoarded. They're integrated slowly, tested. A new blade is used gently at first. A new pot design is tried once before becoming tradition. Change is welcomed, but only on probation. You notice how trade reinforces peace. When your neighbor relies on your fish, and you rely on their grain, conflict becomes inconvenient. Not impossible, just less appealing. A light joke passes through your mind, diplomacy powered by carbs and protein. As night falls, travelers settle in, sharing fires and stories. The settlement feels slightly larger, slightly louder, but not strained. This place knows how to absorb outsiders without losing itself. Before sleep, you realize something important. The Sao settlements endure not because they are hidden, but because they are connected, flexible nodes in a network shaped by water, land, and mutual need. You sense the tension before anyone names it. The lake feels different, edgier, less predictable. Its shoreline no longer settles into a familiar rhythm, and the elders talk more often, voices lower, pauses longer. Change is coming. Again, climate has always been the Sao's quiet rival. Mainstream historical and environmental research confirms that the Lake Chad Basin has undergone dramatic fluctuations in rainfall and water levels over centuries. You feel one of those shifts creeping in now. Rains arrive late, then too hard. Fields drown before crops mature. Fish vanish from usual channels and reappear somewhere else entirely, as if playing a long, exhausting game of hide-and-seek. Adaptation becomes the settlement's full-time job. Homes are reinforced. Some are abandoned and rebuilt farther inland. Canoes are dragged to places that were dry land a generation ago. You watch people read the landscape like a living text. Mud patterns, plant growth, bird behavior, all used to predict what the lake might do next. Historians still argue how accurately ancient communities could forecast these changes, but it's clear the Sao paid close attention. Pressure doesn't come only from nature. Human tension simmers too. Neighboring groups migrate closer as water sources shrink elsewhere. Trade routes become crowded. Boundaries blur. A fishing spot that was yours last season suddenly isn't. Conflict flickers. Brief, sharp, usually resolved before it spirals. Usually. You witness a tense meeting near the village centre. Voices remain controlled, but hands gesture more sharply than usual. Spears are present, not raised, just visible. This is how conflict looks before it turns ugly. Sometimes it stops here, sometimes it doesn't. Archaeological evidence of fortified sites and trauma on skeletal remains suggests violence did occur, though likely episodically rather than constantly. One strange detail surfaces in conversation, a story of a year when the lake receded so far that people followed it, building temporary settlements on what used to be open water. Modern satellite imagery confirms similar retreats in recent history, lending eerie credibility to the tale. You imagine walking where fish once swam, the ground still damp with memory. Despite the strain, humour survives. Someone jokes that the lake is testing loyalty again. Laughter breaks tension. Briefly. Even hardship here is communal. As conditions worsen, decisions must be made. Some families prepare to leave, following kin or opportunity elsewhere. Others stay, betting on the lake's return. Historians still argue whether such migrations were sudden or gradual, but standing here, it feels like both, slow planning punctuated by abrupt departures. You help pack. Tools wrapped carefully, clay figures tucked into bundles, embers carried forward, just in case. Leaving isn't failure, it's strategy. Night falls heavy. Fires burn lower. The settlement feels thinner, quieter, yet not defeated. Adaptation is the Sao's oldest skill. As you lie down, listening to wind ripple across uncertain water, you understand that survival here has never meant staying still. It means moving when you must, holding when you can, and trusting that change, however exhausting, is survivable. You trace the fading footprints of settlements, stepping lightly across mounds that were once bustling with life. The Sao are no longer the dominant presence they once were. Time and circumstance have shifted the landscape, quietly rewriting the story. Yet traces linger, layered in soil, water channels, and memory. Some families have moved east, others south. Mainstream historical evidence shows that as the Sao settlements declined, likely between the 14th and 16th centuries, many people migrated into regions that would later become part of the Konem-Bornu Empire. You walk along a dry channel, imagining caravans and families carrying iron, tools, clay vessels, and oral traditions into new lands. Historians still argue how deliberate these migrations were. Were they planned resettlements, reactive moves to environmental stress, or a mix of both? The answer seems to matter less to the people living it than to those studying it centuries later. In places that once housed circular mud villages, new communities rise atop old ones. Buildings are smaller now, often adapted to drier conditions. The craftsmanship you've admired, ironwork, pottery, terracotta figurines, persists, but in altered forms. Some designs fade, others evolve. Fringe evidence hints that Sao religious motifs subtly influenced neighbouring groups. Small clay figures have been discovered far from Lake Chad, raising the question, did these symbols travel with migrants, or were they imitated by observers? Historians are still unsure. You notice a market forming at a crossroads once thought abandoned. People exchange millet for fish, beads for copper, just as their ancestors did. Trade routes, though shifted, still carry the pulse of old connections. You spot a few older items, clay shards and iron tools, tucked carefully among newer goods. It's as if history itself refuses to be left behind entirely. Conflict has reshaped territories too. Some settlements fortified themselves against occasional raiders, while others merged peacefully with stronger neighbours. Authority structures evolve alongside migration, local chiefs, skilled negotiators, and respected elders continue to guide communities, echoing systems you observed earlier. Power adapts, even when people move. A quirky detail emerges in conversation with an elder from a relocated family. They tell of an ancestor who insisted on carrying a tiny clay crocodile figurine during the journey, for luck and to remind us of home. Historians still debate whether such practices were common or symbolic anecdotes, but you can't help smiling at the continuity of belief. As the sun sets, settlements glow faintly in the distance, smoke rising, the past quietly overlapping with the present. You sense that while the Sao as a political entity faded, their influence, cultural, technological, and spiritual, rippled onward. Migration didn't erase them, it transformed them, and as night drapes across the land, you feel the echo of centuries of movement, survival, and adaptation, lingering like the warmth of embers, waiting to be discovered again. You arrive at the present-day shoreline, though shoreline here is a slippery concept. Lake Chad is smaller now, fragmented, a patchwork of lagoons and marshes instead of the sprawling inland sea you first walked beside. Yet beneath these waters, traces of the Sao remain, silent, patient, like ghosts that refuse to move on. You kneel, dipping your fingers into shallow water, imagining the settlements that once clustered just beneath your touch. Archaeologists have discovered submerged structures, foundations of mud brick huts, pottery shards, and iron remnants. Mainstream evidence confirms that even today, underwater archaeology continues to reveal Sao presence, although interpretation is often complicated by erosion and fluctuating water levels. You notice the shadows of reeds bending in the current, reflecting a quiet truth. The landscape keeps memory as faithfully as it carries life. The area is still alive. Fishermen skim across small channels, children play on mudflats that resurface seasonally, and families settle where water still allows. It's a fragile dance between past and present, human and environment. Fringe speculation suggests that some of the deeper lagoons may conceal entire ceremonial sites, untouched for centuries, waiting for water levels to drop before revealing secrets. Historians still argue whether such submerged settlements were abandoned abruptly, drowned gradually, or intentionally relocated. The uncertainty makes the story feel alive, not static. You wander along what appears to be an old mound barely visible above the water. Clay fragments peek out, iron bits glint faintly. You imagine a young Sao child once playing here, perhaps chasing a bird or mimicking an elder's movements with a small spear. Life was both ordinary and extraordinary, mundane yet suffused with meaning. You realize these traces are less about artifacts and more about continuity, less about things and more about people. You notice how belief, craft, trade, and survival all overlap in these remnants. Iron tools hint at work and defense, pottery suggests both practicality and artistic expression, figurines and symbols whisper of spirituality. Even as the settlements fade, their echoes ripple across generations, shaping nearby peoples and leaving subtle imprints on local culture. A gentle breeze stirs across the lagoon, carrying the faint scent of mud, fish, and drying reeds. You feel a kind of reverence for this persistence. The Sao did not vanish completely. They were absorbed, adapted, and remembered in quiet ways. Migration, climate, and time reshaped them, but fragments endure, under water, under soil, and under memory. As night settles, firelight from nearby camps flickers softly across the water, mirroring stars overhead. You sit quietly, imagining the full breadth of Sao life stretching backward through centuries, their stories embedded in every curve of the lake and every mound of earth. These echoes remind you that even vanished civilizations leave a rhythm in the world, a heartbeat beneath the surface, waiting for those willing to notice. The fire in front of you settles into a quieter rhythm now. No sparks jumping, no sudden crackle, just a low, steady glow, embers breathing softly in shades of orange and red. You draw a little closer, feeling that gentle warmth on your skin, the kind that doesn't demand attention, but rewards stillness. Around you, the lake fades into darkness. Its surface becomes indistinct, no longer water or land, just a calm presence reflecting faint starlight. The Sao are no longer walking beside you, not in the way they were before, yet they haven't gone anywhere either. They linger in the soil beneath your feet, in the memory of fire passed from hearth to hearth, in the quiet knowledge of how to live with change rather than fight it. You picture those circular homes again, softened by time, their walls slowly returning to earth. You picture hands shaping clay, smoothing cracks, lifting nets heavy with fish. All of it slows now, stretching out, dissolving into a warm blur. History stops asking to be understood and simply asks to be felt. The embers pulse once more, then settle. Smoke drifts upward and disappears into the night sky, carrying centuries with it, stories, laughter, worries, small jokes shared during hard years. None of it is urgent anymore. Nothing needs fixing, nothing needs explaining. Your breathing matches the calm around you. Slow, even. Safe. Somewhere far away, water laps gently against reeds. Somewhere closer, fire whispers itself toward sleep. The Sao world, once loud with life, now rests, and you're allowed to rest with it. Let the images soften. Let the lake grow quiet. Let the past fade into a comfortable distance where it can't disturb you, only cradle you. You're warm. You're still. You're exactly where you need to be. Good night.